Last year, I covered Blood Omen, the first in the vampire-centric Legacy of Kain series. If you haven't watched it, please do so. The action-adventure title will satiate your lust for blood and gore, and then return here for a meal of a much different sort. Please note, this review will contain spoilers for the end of Blood Omen. After enacting revenge on the necromancer Mortanius and slaying the 8 guardians of Nosgoth, Kain learns that he is the 9th one. In order for balance to return to the world, Kain must sacrifice himself so that the pillars of power can be renewed. He refuses, for his ceaseless greed and thirst for power is greater than his compassion for the world. Thus, Kain dooms Nosgoth to eternal decay. 1,500 years later, Kain rules over a wasteland of a kingdom, dividing it into regions for his lieutenants to serve over. One of these lieutenants is Raziel. Raziel explains that every few hundred years, Kain would enter a state of metamorphosis and emerge with a new power, which he would bestow upon his vampiric children. However, Raziel had managed to surpass his master, growing a pair of bat wings before him. For his treacherous act, Kain breaks the wings with his bare fists and casts Raziel into the abyss, whose whirling waters are enough to rip vampiric flesh down to the very bone. Millennia passes, and Raziel is resurrected by the Elder God, an ancient, powerful creature that dwells in the darkest depths of Nosgoth. Kain's insolence for the world has corrupted it even further, and the Elder God enlists Raziel as his warrior to stop the vampiric king. Raziel is no longer a vampire, but a shambling corpse, yet his fragile being actually makes him far more powerful than any fleshy being, vampiric or otherwise. Raziel possesses the ability to shift between the world of the material living and the spectral dead. Should he ever fall in combat, he need but replenish his energy to return to the physical world. As a vampire, gaining energy was done by feasting on the blood and flesh of mortals. As an undead wraith, Raziel now hungers for the very souls of living beings. It's with this appetite that Raziel can completely destroy his vampiric brethren, robbing them of every essence of life. The plot by Amy Hennig is delightfully gruesome. Whereas Blood Omen explored a world besieged by plague, Soul Reaver's Nosgoth is barren and feels like the husk of a formerly thriving world. Mankind is gasping its last breaths as vampire scavengers hunt and devour those that remain. The once elegant vampires, able to take forms that could charm even the most stubborn of humans, are now horrific abominations, scurrying about the shadows and laying waste to everything that they claim. The world is depressing, dangerous, and yes, seemingly soulless. It's the perfect backdrop for us to go monster slaying. Blood Omen was inspired by adventure RPGs such as A Link to the Past, as its top-down view and multiple dungeons made clear. Soul Reaver, on the other hand, borrows a page more from Ocarina of Time, focusing on slower, more strategic combat and thought-heavy puzzles. There's also a mix of the Metroid series here too, with a vast wasteland of Nosgoth open to explore. Just like those adventure titles, in order to reach every corner of this damned world, Raziel must strengthen his powers and learn new abilities. Much of Soul Reaver will be spent in combat. On the surface, it may seem eerily similar to the 3D Zelda games. The player typically will target an enemy, circle them, and wait for an opening to tear them to shreds. There is, however, a much deeper element to destroying your foes. Vampires cannot die through normal battle. Cleaving them to a bloody pulp will only weaken and stagger them before their immortal bodies repair the wounds. These children of the night must be slain in very specific ways: impaling, burning, submerging in water, or bathing in sunlight. Raziel knows all too well these weaknesses, and now must exploit them from the beasts that now roam the land. Some of the most thrilling parts of the game are when Raziel is pitted against several foes, and the player must find the best ways to turn them to dust. There are some flaws in the combat structure, though, for one-hit detection is abhorrent, and it's often extremely difficult to know if your blows have landed or not. The same goes for avoiding attacks, as often Raziel will take a hit, even when it seems he's too far away. The moves at your disposal are also extremely limited. Raziel can dodge swiftly, attack with his claws, or the weapon in hand, or toss his weapon to potentially impale his enemy. That about covers it. Blood Omen provided numerous items and spells to lay waste to your enemies, and that's the one area where Soul Reaver comes up short. There are some well-hidden optional spells that one can obtain, but their uses are limited. Magic to cast these powers is hard to come by. They are far too slow to cast reliably. On top of that, most don't offer enough benefits to use over simply slaying them. Shortly into the game, Raziel confronts Kain for the first time, and the vampire lord withdraws his fabled sword, the Soul Reaver. Kain uses it to smite Raziel back into the spectral realm, but in his fury the blade shatters, its essence following Raziel into the land of the dead. This weapon is every bit as fun as it was in the last game, often able to drain the health of monsters with a single blow. Once stunned, Raziel can charge up the blade to render them into cindered piles of bloody meat. Later, Raziel will learn to blast waves of power from the Soul Reaver's tip, burning the flesh of its foes from afar. The only downside is that the Soul Reaver only manifests itself when Raziel is at full health. This means that players will have to be extra careful to preserve it, or else battles will be significantly more difficult. The wind-up to explode fiends can also take a bit of time, where Raziel is prone to getting hit before unleashing chaos. Soul Reaver is equally known for its complex puzzles. Each of the game's dungeons is centered around an intrinsic dilemma Raziel must solve, be it ringing the bells of the old cathedral or constructing a bridge across a wide gap. The best of these puzzles makes use of traveling between planes. The material world behaves as one may expect, where the laws of gravity and motion are persistent. The spectral world is as if frozen in the sands of time. Doors cannot be opened, weapons cannot be held, often the walls of the world become twisted, and the fabric of space becomes corrupted. Raziel can shift into this realm, making use of the morphed landscape or items suspended in the air to reach new areas. The game does have an over-reliance on block puzzles. These task players with moving, flipping, and positioning large, heavy blocks in order to proceed. Sometimes, these must be placed in alcoves to unlock a door, or arranged in such a way to form a bridge. I can see the appeal, with 3D slowly finding its footing in the gaming world, and these puzzles being a good way to interact with a three-dimensional world. But by the midway point, these sometimes lengthy and complicated puzzles become tedious, and by the end of the adventure, they are downright frustrating. One of the best aspects of the title is acquiring new abilities to make Raziel a form of super vampire. There's a great sense of progression in the game, allowing the player to feel as if they have grown in strength after overcoming each hurdle. By the time the credits roll, Raziel will learn to phase through barred areas, traverse the once deadly waterways, climb certain walls, and even use telekinesis. These powers are essential to finding your way around the wasteland of Nosgoth. I do wish, though, that these abilities found greater uses, especially in combat. While the adventuring and exploring improves as the game goes on, the combat remains quite stale. Soul Reaver is one of the best looking PlayStation titles, with an impressive attention to detail on both environments and characters. The expert use of dreary colors keeps the game from appearing too gray or brown. The world is often awash with lonely blues or green, adding to its dead, depressing mood. The opening cinematic, too, remains notable even to this day. It's a wonder that the developers were able to craft something so captivating on this hardware. The shadows as Raziel emerges into the light, the silky texture of his newly developed wings, it all lures the player into this nightmarish world right from the start. While the PlayStation 1 version is certainly the most popular, the Dreamcast version allowed Nosgoth to appear much more crisp, with softer edges and more alluring colors. The later released PC version, though, certainly takes the cake, sporting by far the best graphics and a more sensible control scheme. Maneuvering the camera with the shoulder buttons was clunky, even in 1998, and returning to Soul Reaver in the year 2020 is made all the more complicated because of it. Soul Reaver possesses a score that is equal amounts chilling and adventurous. The main theme, Ozar Midrasha, hypes the player up for a quest of death and vengeance, and prepares them for an epic quest across many worlds. Dungeons have haunting melodies that behave as if coming from their vacant, dark corridors. Composer Kurt Harlan brings passion and imagination to the title, and the game is made all the more terrifying because of it. For as great of an adventure Soul Reaver crafts, the ending is sorely a letdown. It is common knowledge now that the developers rushed to get the game onto store shelves, choosing to complete it halfway, else it may not have seen light at all. Thus, Raziel's journey comes to an abrupt halt, leading to an unsatisfied conclusion. It would be 2 whole years before the second part released on the PlayStation 2, and for fans, this time span was achingly long. Just know, going into this one, that you'll want to have the sequel on hand, or else your quest for vengeance will be incomplete.